We've been here for just about 10 years. And we chose this community because it's diverse, it's close to Manhattan, has a real family-friendly environment, and it just seemed like a good place to settle down. I had just gotten a cell phone at the time, mainly for work reasons, because everyone told me, you need to have a cell phone, you need to have a cell phone. So when the antennas did go up, or when I heard about it, just kind of said, oh, I get a signal, great.
We have embraced this technology with a tremendous fervor, perhaps unlike any other technology. With over 3.5 billion cell phone subscribers on the face of the Earth, that translates into billions upon billions of dollars in revenue. But there are some hidden charges as well. With tens of thousands of antennas built up to support the growing number of users, this is the price we're all forced to pay.
If somebody lives near a cell tower, there is a constant radio frequency signal that's coming out of that. It will boost higher when somebody is calling for that system to function, which is something that people who are using cell phones need to be made aware of, because if somebody is making a cell phone call, then they're asking the person who's living near the infrastructure to take a spike in exposure when that system is online. However, even when in the middle of the night when nobody is making a cell phone call, there is still a constant small signal that's being given off from a tower.
The question marks arose very early. Already in the 80s and 90s, there were a lot of question marks whether this was good to irradiate the whole population 24 hours around the clock and wherever you are, actually.
Earth has a natural level of electromagnetic radiation, which is produced by itself, the cosmos, and the sun. But the signal from cellular communications is adding to this otherwise low background level of electromagnetic radiation.
Somebody did a study in Europe probably about 7 years ago, 6-7 years ago, in which they measured the ambient backgrounds of European cities, and they found that the background levels had increased by a factor of over 3,000% from what it had been a decade ago. And that was in European cities. And it's thought that American cities are comparable to that now, too.
The background levels that we are sitting in right now, they are enormously high compared to normal background. I mean, just for the third generation mobile phones, the increase compared to normal background is 1 million billion times. So it's an enormous increase, and we haven't even bought a mobile phone. We're just standing here in the radiation from cell towers.
People don't understand very often that radio frequency radiation is a form of energetic air pollution. They think that it just harmlessly goes through living systems and leaves all living molecules unaffected and unimpaired. That's not necessarily the case.
There's a wonderful study from Italy which measured ambient levels near a cell phone tower. And you could actually see when all the antennas went off and had lunch. There's a dip in the ambient levels. And then after lunch and everybody has a little siesta, it goes back up. I mean, you can see the human influence.
The problem is we place antennas in the center of residential areas, we place them on schools, we place them in busy downtown settings where hundreds and thousands of people are exposed. You can't avoid it.
You are basically not safe anywhere. And soon there is no controlled population left because everybody's reached by the waves. This is the world's largest biological experiment ever. We really haven't given the full observation to the possible risks.
We know from a variety of studies of animals, of cellular systems, that there are biological effects from this non-ionizing radiation that are mediated by a variety of different mechanisms.
There are probably about 13 studies that have found DNA breaks, both double and single-strand DNA breaks, with cell phone frequencies. Now, single-strand DNA breaks are known to repair themselves. A lot of things break DNA. Air pollution breaks DNA. Any number of things will. But double-strand DNA breaks are thought not to repair themselves, and that can lead to genetic mutations.
People don't realize what these antennas mean. They don't understand how they function. They don't understand how their cell phone really functions. So I was naive in that way. Never even thought about what it meant. When I first became involved with this issue, I had 2 children, and now I have 3, and of course they were the main reason, I think, why I became so involved and so concerned about what was going on, because obviously children are, the most vulnerable in our society. I felt like I needed to educate myself, and as I started to research more and more, I saw that this was actually a very controversial subject, and that the WHO had identified radio frequency radiation as a potential human carcinogen. And I said, well, that can't be good. That just can't be good. So even if right now the studies are inconclusive, there's enough evidence here to say we should be thinking about this a little bit more deeply than we are right now.
A lot of people presume that if something is in our presence, that someone somewhere determined that it was safe. People are making presumptions of safety that really shouldn't be made.
There are standards for non-ionizing radiation protection. They are set on the basis of the assumption that there's no adverse health effect to humans unless the radiation is sufficient to cause tissue heating. In other words, it's acting like a microwave oven, and you don't want to bake your brain as you would a potato in your microwave oven. The assumptions behind the standards that exist are simply wrong. They're not set by health professionals, they're set by physicists and engineer types, and they are ignoring the evidence for human health.
You should know that who wrote the standards, which is the Motorola's, the Nokias of the world, the military who have their own interests in all this. They have no interest in lowering the standard. They want to keep it as high as they can.
As we get more information, we find that our standards are too lax. And not having a standard that is protective of human health provides no motivation for the cell phone companies to find ways of allowing us to use wireless communication, but to use it safely. In many cases, we find that the technical people can find ways of utilizing the technology with less exposure if they have a motivation to do so.
But with money, not health, being the prime motivator, antennas continue to go up.
The first set was put up in 1999. It was actually put up on a Sabbath. The entire building are Sabbath observant Jews. And and no one could really protest or do anything about that at the time. And then there were other sets put up through the years. We have 3, possibly 4 companies on the roof of our building. I know that at one point there were 27, but I think that there have been another 3 towers added by a different company in the last 2 years. We feel very powerless in terms of what's being done, the money that is being earned at our expense.
We bought this place 2 years ago and spent a year renovating it. And then when we moved in, within, a couple of weeks, I started getting terrible headaches. And we thought it had been maybe miswired. So it took us a while to bring in an environmental engineer from the West Coast. So he came and spent 3 days here doing all sorts of research. And he came back and he said it's wired perfectly, but the problem is the cell antennas outside your window and off the roof decks.
In fact, when he spent the night here, and he went inside a tent to get through the night, a electromagnetic wave reflecting tent. And of course, we sleep under tents now.
What's funny is since we've been complaining and sending them letters that 2 of the antennas, they seem to have pointed in a different direction. But there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 right here on these 2 sides. Then on the north and west side, there's, I don't know how many more, 10 more.
This presumption that we can just continue to put massive amounts of wireless radiation into the ambient environment, whether it's from a cell phone, a cell tower, a Wi-Fi system, endless amounts of broadcast radiation, endless amounts of satellite radiation, all manner of military applications. The presumption that we can just continue to dump this into the environment like that with no consequence to us or to other species really needs to be rethought, because it just simply is not the case.
There is getting to be a whole body of literature that is demonstrating changes in behavior, changes in ability to learn and remember. Some studies are now showing that people that spend a long time on a cell phone aren't as alert and bright after they get off the cell phone as they were before.
When you look on a lot of public health measures, there has been a clear-cut deterioration, especially since 1997, since then the second-generation mobile phones, the GSM systems, were introduced. And you see a very clear-cut deterioration of the public health.
Most of us have lived with cell phones or near cell phone towers for years without feeling any effects. But one group in particular does. One day, Rigmor, a schoolteacher in Stockholm, Sweden, discovered that she was sensitive to electrical devices. After visiting doctors and being sent to psychologists and getting no answers, an engineer friend of hers helped her with the diagnosis. Rigmor was electro-hypersensitive. After doing some research of her own on electro-hypersensitivity, she discovered that she had to electro-sanitize her home. Rigmor had to change the wiring, add cages to her electrical devices and nets to her windows. The electro-sanitization worked, at least for a while.
1995, I wasn't electro-hypersensitive anymore. But then I got ill again when the mobile phone came, 1997. Just like other allergies, some people can't stand one flower and another can't stand another flower. And among electro-hypersensitive people, we are allergic to different frequencies.
We did a double-blind exposure test with people with electro-hypersensitivity, and That was in 1994 already, and that was the very first study using mobile phones. And one of these people in the study were able to 100% of the time pick out correctly the presence or not of such a mobile phone.
I went to the doctor, and he thought I had problems with my nerves, so he sent me to a psychologist. I worked very hard. I both taught at high school and was writing my thesis in literature. So I thought myself that, well, perhaps it's too much, but I was a very happy person, so in fact I didn't really understand.
When we talk about people with a functional impairment, electrohypersensitivity, we really talk about anyone. It doesn't seem to be any specific profile. There has been calculations country by country, and it boils down to somewhere between 2 to 6% of the general population. Just in a country like the United States, it would be in the order of 10 to 15 million people that would be electrohypersensitive. Here in Sweden, for instance, we talk about approximately 250,000 people with electrohypersensitivity out of a population of 9 million. And out of these 250,000, I would say maybe 500 have real big problems, and some of them even live out in the woods and things like this. And that is, of course, a dramatic change of your life.
After the mobile phone came and wireless internet, you're exposed all the time, so the only place that is safe if you have a field-reduced home is to stay at home, and that's what I do. We have a lot of friends coming here. I can't visit friends. I had to stop going by bus because people spoke on their mobile phones, and I got dizzy, and I wasn't well at all. And I also had got sleeping difficulties, and the pupils didn't use their mobile phones in the classroom, but during breaks. And suddenly I got more ill than ever, so I was put on sick leave, and after a year or so I was pre-retired.
After being close to a cellular phone for 10-15 minutes, my body turns red, the side facing the cellular phone.
If I am in the vicinity of someone talking on a cell phone, I come down with influenza-like symptoms, with pain throughout my body, a feeling of fever without actually having a fever, headaches, and a sore throat.
The burning feels as though it goes through my entire body. The pain is unbearable. If I can, I have to move away.
When I ride the bus or subway during rush hour, there are often so many people talking on phones at the same time that it is impossible to maintain an adequate distance from me. Even transmitters around the city are a problem. Some bus stops are located so close to transmitters that I can't wait there.
It's more difficult with microwaves. I can't turn them off and they penetrate everything. The antennas along the roads make it so that I can't travel anywhere. I get convulsions and an extreme burning sensation on my face. I also get black spots before my eyes. Cellular phones, which so many people use while walking around, also affect me.
When you have people complaining all over the world with the same kinds of reactions, what you need to do is throw out the theory that says this can't be happening and restructure a model and take a look at the fact that maybe not everybody is crazy. Maybe the people that are reporting adverse effects are reporting legitimate physical reactions.
I get very ill if someone has forgotten to put off his mobile phone when they visit me. After a couple of hours I feel ill. After 4 hours I can't speak anymore.
What we need to do is listen to the people that are saying things like, my health is crashing, I can't live here anymore. Need to listen to them and believe them, because these are our canaries in a coal mine at the moment.
People with electrohypersensitivity, they seem to react to this environmental toxic exposure that you and we do not react to this. And maybe we are the losers because we will have a risk of getting long-term effects like neurological diseases, cancer, and whatever.
It's very difficult to explain to those who don't believe in us But that's a fact that also the scientists that get money to make research on us, and that's not very often they get anything. They could show that on cells. Cells can't imagine things. They don't know about psychology.
One of the big issues is the degree to which that radiation penetrates into our body. And it has often been assumed that it does not. But there is increasing and very convincing evidence that, in fact, it does.
When you're a surgeon, and I'm dealing with people, of course, every day, but in part of my research, I've been studying rats when it comes to what happens to the rats when they are exerted to the radiation from mobile phones, basically. But also then you can translate the information that you collect from rats being exposed to the mobile phones into a knowledge about what happens at a longer distance. And we have shown that animals who have been exposed for 2 hours to the radio frequency of a mobile phone, both at 28 days afterwards and 50 days afterwards, there are damaged nerve cells in up to 2% of the tissue, both in the region where we keep our memory function and also in the layer of the brain with which we think. This makes me feel that this is something we have to be careful about.
You can clearly see that from a number of studies that has used low levels, mimicking what you get right now while we do this interview from the cellular towers. And you see there are a lot of dramatic effects on biological systems. We talk about 24/7, around-the-clock exposure, wherever you are, and your whole body. You never get away from it. And it seems from our studies that maybe your immune system can cope with for a time, but it will deteriorate, and then the irradiation will definitely damage cells at a deeper level, and the question is what will then happen. And for us, the big question marks are effects, for instance, on the immune system, on the DNA, on short-term memory, concentration capacity, sleep quality, fertility, etc.
People have complained of dizziness, inability to concentrate, disruption of menstrual cycles. 2 women that I know who are struggling very, very much in terms of getting pregnant, and the first one definitely noticed a change after the towers had been up for a while.
And the question is, of course, as you say, we don't see people falling dead on the street. But, for instance, in Sweden, more than 1/3 of people report heavy problems with their nighttime sleep. And sleep is one of these subjective areas which definitely various forms of electromagnetic fields will have an impact on.
We vary in our own genetic susceptibility to exposure to environmental factors. One person can smoke 2 packs of cigarettes for 20 years and not get lung cancer. Another person can smoke 5 cigarettes a week and develop lung cancer because of the tobacco. So it isn't just a matter of exposure, it's a matter of individual sensitivity. But on a population basis, the evidence we have at present suggests that the aggregate risk in the population increases as the intensity, the duration of exposure become greater.
In our building, there have been numerous deaths from cancer. You know, it's difficult to say that this is definitely a result of the towers, but definitely there is a cluster of deaths in this apartment building since the 1990s that are the cause of cancer. You know, I think that things happen incrementally. It's not all at once, like it went up and boom, you feel something. But that as time goes by, it's noticeable.
We have a massive human experiment of people that have been exposed to something that probably is going to result in an increased risk of these cancers. And we won't know for another 5 or 10 years how serious this is. In my judgment, the evidence right now is sufficient to say that we should be very cautious, and from a public health perspective, this is a very serious issue.
We haven't had a long enough latency period for a civilian-based cell system. Many of the latency periods for brain tumors, for instance, or cancers in general, have a latency period of at least 10 years. And the technology has only been around for the last 10, 15 years at the most. We are seeing increases in brain tumors. We're seeing increases in Alzheimer's. We're seeing increases in all of the neurotransmitter diseases, ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, Parkinson's. These are all disease systems that are known to be associated with low-level energy exposures.
But when I hear the American Cancer Society talk about, the fact that, for less than 10 years we have no problem, that's kind of like not kind of missing the big picture. I mean, if you look at smoking, which they should know all about, you look after 10 years among smokers, you do not see a statistical significant increase in lung cancer. Same with asbestos. There's no doubt asbestos is a horrible carcinogen. I mean, it killed many hundreds of thousands of people. Yet, if you look at people who are exposed to asbestos after 10 years, they do not also have a statistically significant increase in mesothelioma. I mean, you have to go out 15, 20 years before you start to see the real impact.
This is also the first time in human history that people have actually had transmitters up against their skulls. It's not a good idea. The human anatomy is not meant to have a transmitter up against its head or anywhere else on the anatomy.
The particular concern is the unique vulnerability of children. And the more research that comes out from various studies, particularly the Scandinavian studies, show that children that begin to use cell phones before the age of 20 are about 5 times more likely to go on to develop brain cancer than if they use them after the age of 30. And people that begin to use cell phones between the ages of 20 and 30 are more vulnerable to develop brain cancer than those that use them after 30. There is no reason for a child to be on the phone all the time. There are reasons they shouldn't be, independent of the health concerns. But it is dangerous for children, more dangerous than for adults.
It's not only the people who put it towards their head who have a penetrance of the electromagnetic field. It's also those who go next to his father. If father keeps the mobile phone in his pocket and the son walks away some 20 centimeters away, his brain is penetrated too by the fields from the mobile phone.
You only would need like 1 minute exposure of a child to change for more than 1 hour the electrical activity of the brain, and at very low exposure levels.
I think it's a very dangerous thing that we're doing now in so many young people in particular, using cell phones as their primary form of communication and abandoning their landline connections. Communications industries, they want the world to go wireless because it's much cheaper for them to do that. That's really where they're trying to force the technology to go.
If you start at a very young age and you speak every day, several hours, it might be so that already in the middle age you have extorted your reserve capacities of your brain, so that autoimmune diseases and neurodegenerative diseases might debut earlier than they should.
And now, for the first time in human history, brain tumors are the #1 cancer killer of children under the age of 18. For the first time in human history. That should tell us something.
The diseases of concern, leukemia, brain tumors, parotid gland tumors, these are serious life-threatening diseases. And if they increase in the population, particularly if they increase from childhood exposure or young adult exposure, these are very debilitating. They're going to increase years of life lost in young people, not just in elderly.
But the industry has its own response to concerns about cell towers going up. Just hide them.
This steeple that has inside it a number of cell sites is a replica of the steeple we had built 53 years ago on the church, which is very beneficial for our town because they don't like to see unattractive cell sites around, and no one even knows it's here in this one. So that's a big advantage. In this area of town, which is a major area of town, you had dead zones by all the carriers. It was horrible. And one of the enterprising lawyers from one of the companies stopped by here and asked us if we would be interested in having cell sites in our steeple. And we, of course, said yes and started the process to tell all the carriers that they could come into our steeple, and did that and put together contracts, and here we are.
It was a perfect opportunity for us to provide, since this is the highest location, the signals from here in service to the community. So for us it sort of ties in with that idea of bringing service, but at some point the conversation went to the symbolic significance of the church being in the middle of a dead zone and providing sort of life or service where there was none. And we sort of mined that at some point for that sort of metaphorical value. Yes, there is some misconception about radiation and those kinds of things, but on the whole, we did not have that high response from the community regarding that. We had a process where we invited the community to an informational meeting where we invited their questions, and some showed and asked their questions, and they were answered.
There were some concerns, but mostly unfounded, and we had experts there who knew about the rumors of radiation or things like that, and I think they dispelled both us, who live 130 feet from the top of this, as well as others on the lack of any danger.
If they've defined it, they've framed it, and they've interpreted it and set the standards accordingly, how likely are they to say, oh, well, we need a redo on this one?
This is a very serious issue of which we don't have the answers, and we're not doing anything about it, not even studying it. In the United States today, there is not one study going on. Zero.
There should have been, in parallel, a very, very thorough, broad, genuine research being done, supported by states and by the suppliers of the mobile phone utensils.
It's impossible to get any funding, which is odd, and I don't have any clear-cut answer. You have to ask politicians, funding organizations, the industry and so on, why they don't want scientists like myself to really prove it's safe. Because they say it's safe, but it's not safe to study it.
Electrohypersensitivity was acknowledged by the government in 1995, the 15th of June. But then something happened. That was 1997. Then GSM telephones came on the market. Many people bought mobile phones. And mobile telephony is a very important thing for Swedish economy. Because we have Ericsson. Now the authorities are against that. They say that there is nothing called electrohypersensitive. It's the same in Finland, Nokia. It's difficult to be electrohypersensitive in Finland.
The industry is making the same mistakes the chemical industries have made in the past, which is to continue to deny that the evidence indicates there is a hazard.
The cell phone industry betrayed the American public. I mean, if you go back to the history, and believe me, I lived through this history, in 1993, they made a commitment to the American public to spend $25 billion to do the research to find out whether there was any problem. They never did it. It was a scam. And in that, it took 6 or 7 years for the scam to work itself through, and by the year 2000, when there's supposed to be all these results, there was, they went to the cupboard, and the cupboard was bare.
If you read your science history, unfortunately that has been the case in many situations, many questions and many countries, that the industry has put their hands into these issues. The most sort of famous question is, of course, the tobacco scandal.
The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency had the best research laboratory on Earth. It was well-funded, it had top-notch scientists, very curious, very competent people. That agency was almost completely defunded just about the time that the Telecommunications Act was being enacted in America.
We have the outrageous situation where our U.S. Congress passed a law several years ago that prohibits communities from objecting to the placement of a cell phone tower on the basis of concerns for health.
It was 1996 when the Congress of the United States, responding to industry requests, set up a plan to have a nationwide cell transmission system. The Congress assigned to the Federal Communications Commission the responsibility for licensing telecom companies and for trying to keep obstacles out of the way. And so Congress passed a provision that preempts all state and local government and said that if the FCC set up safety regulations, that would govern and nobody else could interfere with it. That was a very sensible thing at the time because it really started the race to get the telecom system operating nationwide. The problem is that, it became rigid and began to have adverse consequences.
Adverse for the health of the people living under the Telecom Act, but not to the finances of the congressmen who wrote and supported it. In fact, the industry paid nearly $12 million in campaign contributions between 1994 and 1998, with nearly $7 million in the run-up to 1996 when the Telecom Act was passed. And for signing the bill into law, President Clinton's 1996 re-election campaign received nearly $80,000 from the industry.
Telecom companies essentially bought and paid Congress for the votes to pass this act, which they believed had absolute preemption over local zoning and planning regulations, taking local control of the placement of towers out of the hands of the people who are going to live right next to them.
But people are slowly starting to fight a process that strips them of control over their environment.
We were supposed to have cell antenna put our rooftop by T-Mobile. In 2004, they signed a contract, a co-board president, to install 6 antenna and a cell tower, 16,000 pounds, on our rooftop. And a year later, when they were about to install it, some of the tenants, the shareholders like me, found out this was going to happen. We researched the dangers of them, decided not to have it done, and we got a temporary restraining order. We took T-Mobile to court, and we went through a lot of court dates. We went through lots of affidavits signed by people in the building. We got people in the neighborhood to sign 400 petitions. We did a lot of research, a lot of mobilizing, press conferences, newspaper articles. I created a coalition of neighborhood groups and legislators in Albany and the City Council who were working on this whole issue to begin to work together to call attention to the whole subject.
Burden should not have to fall on the people, but Congress was bought and paid for, and the telecom companies closed the door on individuals. You're seeing a groundswell of people in America claiming their rights to challenge the failure of the FCC to set those standards.
We have been in touch with lawyers who think we may have a precedent-setting case because of the measurements in our apartment. But again, the question is, where's the proof? Do you have to die of cancer first?
But we started this fight here in New York City 5-6 years ago. And that was when people didn't know what these little towers were. Now they're popping up next to everybody's bedroom window. Completely unregulated. Less regulated here in New York City than probably anywhere in the world. I got a bill passed, which for the first time had the city keep track of them. Other bills I've been trying to get passed, but I've been stymied by the multi-billion-dollar industry and by the fact that the federal government coddles these phone carriers.
There's a lot of money involved for the U.S. government in licensing these microwave spectra. There's a lot of money for the telecommunications companies who every day receive your payment for your cell phone. And that's ongoing revenues. The telecom companies have to get their foot in the door in a small community to put up a cell tower. The lure to get the small community to put up that cell tower is an ongoing revenue from a contract for leasing that space. $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, it's not out of the question to get that every month. What town or what church, what person with property isn't going to take up that offer?
I've counted more than 14 towers or antennas over on that building. I think they get something like $25,000 a tower a year. So you think, you know, it's a huge, huge profit-making situation for them.
The landlords are making thousands of dollars a month on this. The companies are making billions of dollars on this. So there's a lot of money, and the lobbyists are getting paid lots of money to donate to elected officials' campaigns. They can put them anywhere, and the reason they put them there is because they get a better deal from the landlord.
There needs to be opportunity for more stakeholders to be involved in actually looking at where are we putting these? Are there too many? How do we get the telecommunications companies to work together? Of course, I know they're all competing against one another. They are out to all make their profits, but how can we force a more comprehensive policy that's really going to put the public's interest, not just the interest of using a cell phone, but really looking at what the environmental impact is of all these antennas going up. You can see I've got them in the back, I've got them in the front, they're down the street, I mean, they're everywhere. And I think people don't even realize how widespread they are.
These signals are everywhere, and they're able to reach us even in the homes we believe are sacred and safe. We have absolute protection to be safe in our own homes. Under the Telecom Act and under the failure to set these safety standards, we are not safe.
Health, welfare, and safety, that's assigned to the states and local government. And that's what the interaction is here. You gave us a job to do, but then you said, but don't do it when it comes to cell towers. And that's why we are trying to push the rights of the people to have their local government be able to protect their health, but the federal government, but it's got to be in a reasonable framework that allows cell transmission to go on, but at the same time without hurting people.
Like asbestos, like lead paint, no one knew about it early. All we're looking for is to regulate these until we know for sure that they're not harmful. And it has to be done at a federal level because they have stymied all local governments said we can't do anything based on health concerns.
We've tried to put this issue before the Supreme Court at least twice to order the FCC to update its regulation. And so far, nothing doing. But we're on the path again. We've already filed papers that will get us before the Supreme Court before the year is out. And slow but sure, the combination of what the scientists are finding and reporting, and more responsible scientists, not just people who are off on a frolic, is going to make a difference.
When Americans know they've got rights, I believe each one of us will stand up and fight for those rights. It starts with one person very often. I think the telecommunications industry has been extremely aggressive in tamping down and stopping people from asserting those rights. Witness the fact that many of those cases have died on the vine at a low court level. Very few Americans have pressed and pressed to appeal. It's expensive. It is expensive, and to a degree, we've been pursuing a pro bono practice to change the law.
Sometimes I feel as if we're running against, like just running up a hill that we're never going to get to the top of. There's so many of them still going up until they reverse the ruling in the city council. They can do anything they want with any landlord they want. And anybody who hears about this doesn't seem to know what's going on, that there are other people fighting against it because the press doesn't cover it.
Right here at City Hall, too. I don't want to take the blame off the people behind me because they haven't moved on my bills. I have simple bills that I need passed. Community notice, co-location. Other cell companies come in and prove that they really need it in the spot, and they're not just putting it there to prevent a competitor from putting it there. Have a cell company come in and show us why they can't put this on a commercial building, on an industrial building, not next to somebody's bedroom window. I've been fighting this for 5 years now, and the entire time I've been fighting it, cell towers have been popping up across the street from people's bedrooms. People have moved that I know, but you move, and you never know that they're not going to put another one up across the street from your new house, and there's nothing you can do about it.
The solution is not people packing up and moving, because you really can't escape these antennas or these towers. You just can't escape them. They're everywhere. So the solution is really having some kind of public policy on the books that's looking to protect the public.
People have started lawsuits. There's almost no way you can win. Cell companies are having landlords sign 20, 30-year leases, and they won't even let the landlord out. Many landlords I've spoken to, they say, oh, I would never have done that had I known about the potential risks. They can't get out of the contract now because it's a completely one-sided contract. They don't even use attorneys, the landlords, because it's so much money per month that they get, and now they're stuck in this contract.
Because of the preemptive element of the Telecom Act, lawyers who raise challenges in federal court to these towers and their placement, their specific placement, have to look for a handle that may assail the Telecom Act's preemptive provision.
We went to court to get a temporary restraining order. We did that about 3 times. Second judge said to them that they had to disclose a whole list of things to her about what they did not give information accurately to us about. They got so concerned about that they tried to jump it to appeals court. The appeals court jumped it back to her. So what ended up happening was it went to the Court of Appeals. It came back to the regular court, civil court. And at that point, it got stalemated because T-Mobile did not want to do anything further about it. So we still had the case in court. We had a suit against them, and they had a suit against us for breaking the contract. And our suit against them was for misrepresenting the size of the antenna.
Dina Yeager, a mother of 2 children, heard news of a plan by Verizon to install a 150-foot cell tower on a firehouse less than 1,200 feet away from her home. Concerned over her family's health and safety, but knowing she could not raise the issue in court, Dina Yeager instead challenged the placement of the antenna based on the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and the fact that rare and endangered species of birds frequent her property.
It's ironic, isn't it, that we have to raise the issue of the safety of birds, but I've often said birds don't have lobbyists, and it may have left the very loophole it requires to get us to a high court to hear this issue. we don't believe that we are preempted to raise the issue of human health when it comes to the failure of the FCC to set those non-thermal effect standards. And that's the point that we raise time after time in these cases in federal court.
We need to look at things that to get around the fact that we can't look at health, which is a primary concern here. Others are legitimate concerns also, but health is the major concern, and we can't touch it because the federal government is protecting this multi-billion-dollar industry.
And while fighting the cellular industry is a difficult task, after 3 years of court battles, this one co-op building in Brooklyn showed that it isn't impossible.
We basically beat T-Mobile, and they decided to go away, and we got them to sign off on they're not coming back. There's no cost to our building.
People in the United States are not the only ones trying to fight for the regulation of antenna sites. In cities, towns and villages across the globe, people are learning about the health impacts and protesting against the towers.
September 4, 2008, the European Parliament voted strongly in favor to have a general overhaul of these exposure limits, and they said they were actually obsolete. They need to be strongly reduced.
It's a global problem. It perhaps is even a greater problem in some developing countries, because many developing countries don't have landlines. It's just too expensive and difficult in the era of easy use of cell phones.
In the Arab village of Asifia in northern Israel, frustrations grew over the large number of antennas in the village and the lack of government response to their requests to take them down. But the situation changed on March 14, 2000, when telecom engineers arrived in the village.
في هاي المنطقة في عندنا بعض الشباب اللي راقبوا التقنيين ووصلوا لهون لاقوا إنه عم بينزلوا الأجهزة مشان يحطوا الأجهزة ويقووا المحطة اللي كانت متواجدة هون في هاي البيت هناك. هون احتشدوا آلاف من المواطنين، يعني صار في تذمر عند المواطنين من هذا الوضع، لذلك قالوا إذا القانون ما بده يوقف على جنبنا احنا رايحين نزيل الانتنات.
In a sphere where they put antennas, after about 6-7 years, they started to get cancer cases near the antennas. Many cases just where the antennas were.
3.5 years ago, I had cancer. It was very difficult for me when I know it, because when I was in the office of the doctor that said to me that you had cancer, my daughter, the eldest one, was with me. It was very difficult for me as a mother to look to my daughter's eyes and see her crying for me. There was another difficult moment for me after I knew that I had this disease. The moment that I had to tell my mother and my father that they have another child who was affected by cancer. And it was scaring till death. How can I look in my mother's eyes and tell her that your daughter had cancer? My mother was crying all the time. 4 surgeries and 3.5 months of chemistry. And after that, radiation, the whole treatment. My youngest child was 3 years old only. It was difficult for me because everything was going on my mind that I'm going to die and leave him alone to struggle without a mother.
بعد 1995 صارت تكاثر في أمراض السرطان في عسفيا، وصارت الأمراض تزيد والحالات الموت تزيد، وصارت المواطنين حتى وصلوا لوضع إنه صاروا يخافوا يعملوا فحوصات دم أو يروحوا لعند الطبيب إنه يلاقي عندهم في مرض سرطان. حالات الموت الغريبة من نوعها والكثير اللي كانت في شهر نوفمبر 1999. كان في هنا حالات موت نتيجة أمراض السرطان في شهر 1 15 واحد توفوا سرطان منهن حياة أخوي.
We took the places of the antennas and put them on a map. And we took all the cases of cancer in last 7 years and put them also on a map. And we got a thrilling picture of cases of cancer near the antennas. And when you see that cancer cases are just near the antennas, you can see the association.
احنا توجهنا في مكاتب للكنيست، للجان في الكنيست، للوزارات، للشركات الهوائيات، توجهنا لهم ان يلاقوا حل لمشكله الاشعاع اللي عم تطلع من هاي الانتنات وما كانش في تجاوب منهم بتاتا.
Nowadays, Slimane is on a new mission to locate hidden antennas in the village.
الأجهزة اللي موجودة معنا احنا بنلقط انه في إشعاع موجود في المنطقة، ابتداء من هاي المنطقة من هون ناحية البيت هذاك اللي موجود قبالنا خزان المي، بعدين هناك تحت هذا الخزان تحت هاي البيوت الإشعاع بيوقف، وبعدين لما بنطلع منه للغرب بيرجع الإشعاع وبيبين على الأجهزة الموجودة معنا. احنا كل ما عم نقرب على البيت الإشعاع بيعلى أكثر، عم بيقوى، وهذا بدل إنه البيت فيه إشعاع، يعني في مصدر للإشعاع اللي عم بيطلعه سببه الأنتينا. كمان المخشير عند زمير كمان نفس الشيء صار 1.2. كل ما بنقرب وبنطلع على سوا البيت مثلا بنلاقي إنه الأنتينا عم تشتغل في قوة. احنا بنشك في إنسان معين في هاي الحارة إنه هو عنده الأنتينا، لأنه الأجهزة بتدل. إحنا طبعا توجهنا له، رايحين نتوجه له كمان في المستقبل. في كثير ناس اللي بيشتغلوا معنا في هذا الموضوع إنه يزيح ويزيل الأنتينا الموجودة عنده. إنه هو ما بيسمح لنا نفوت على جميع الغرف. البيت مكون من 4 طبقات، يعني ما فينا احنا نفوت على كل غرفة وما فيش لنا صلاحية، والقانون مش في ايدنا نفوت على كل غرفة. أما احنا متأكدين إنه في أنتينا موجودة عنده مخباية.
The Druze, Christian and Muslim leaders of the village put forth a joint statement proclaiming it sacrilegious to install cell phone antennas.
هذا الشيء كان له تأثير فعال، تأثيره كان جدا فعال عند ناس اللي كمان زاحوا أنتينات اللي احنا ما كناش علمانين إنه في عندنا أنتينات. قبل 2-3 قدرنا ننزل قبل تشغيلها محطة اللي كانت بيحطوها بين عسفية والدادي، ووصلنا الخبر ورحنا لصاحب البيت. أما لما فتنا على الدار لجوا شفنا وين كانوا بدهم يحطوا الأجهزة قبال غرف النوم تبع أطفاله. هو يمكن ما فكر إنه أطفاله يمرضوا، بس أنا متأكد إنه طمع في $1500 وال $2000 اللي كانوا بدي يدفعوهن. والشركات عم تستغل الوضع المادي المزري اللي احنا موجودين فيه منشان يقدموا مصالحهم الخاصة. واليوم عايش البلد اليوم من غير انتينات، والحمد لله عايشين. الانتينات هي مش إشي اللي أنا مجبور أخذه، هو مش حليب للأطفال. وفي كثير ناس اللي بقول لك أنا هيك مرتاح، أنا هيك مرتاح ما بدي أنتينا.
One of the many ironies in all this business, if people agree not to use their phone, they wouldn't need a tower. So, you know, it would be quite easy to have a region without without a tower by just making an agreement. Listen, if you come and live here, you're not going to be able to use your cell phone. You're going to have to use an old-fashioned landline. You know, end of story. I mean, it's not an impossible thing. It's just a choice. People love the phones, hate the towers. They don't want to live without the cell phones, but they don't want their tower. Well, if they don't use their phone, they don't need the tower. It's really that simple.
It's not going to be helpful if we think that all modern technology is bad for us. I mean, who wants to do that? I mean, I don't want to live in a world where there's no radio and no TV and no electricity. But it's a question of bringing more intelligence to the purchasing decisions that we make, how long we use certain things, the wiring decisions that we make, and as societies, to bring awareness of the infrastructure decisions that need to be made. There are much safer infrastructures than what we're doing now.
I did get rid of my cell phone. I don't think that people need to get rid of their cell phones. That's not what I'm suggesting. What concerns me is where these are, how they're in close proximity to where people live, are the different carriers planning with each other in terms of where they're going to go? None of that is happening. There's no coordination. Like I said, there's no policy. There's no public policy on this issue. The industry's been able to have free reign. And so, you know, yes, while people need their cell phone service, that's absolutely true. They don't need to go outside someone's window. They don't need to go across a school. They don't need to go in places like that where you're really potentially putting the public at risk.
In my judgment, we are sitting on a ticking bomb. And we're not doing what we should do to advise people on ways that they can reduce their exposure, to tell them that they should reduce their exposure, that they should just be aware of this threat. You know, I sincerely hope it's not as bad as I think it is. But my job as a public health official is to do what I can to prevent disease, not wait till people develop their brain tumor and then find ways of treating it. And I think that the evidence at present calls for an active, urgent message to the public, to the politicians, to the companies, that we must find ways of reducing exposure to radio frequency fields.
Everybody needs this mobile so much. It's such a beloved thing. It's so useful. I used to say it's saved so many people's lives in earthquakes and in crimes and wherever. So it saves so many lives. And so far, we don't know how many lives were taken.